Nothing But the Truth. Hello, I'm Raj Chengappa of India Today and your host for Nothing But the Truth. Every week, we will deal with issues of concern and bring you perspectives and clarity as to why these matter to you and the one clear truth that emerges. Maldives. The word evokes magnificent coral islands, picturesque atolls, and luxurious holiday resorts. But recently, the country's name in the eyes of many Indians have taken a different turn to the negative, especially after the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to India's Lakshadweep Islands not far away in the new year and his exhortation that Indians must experience the beauty of the Lakshadweep Islands. What followed was an ugly spat where three ministers in the new Maldivian government used the social media platform X to make derogatory and unnecessary comments against the Prime Minister and Indians. That saw a huge outrage and a backlash, particularly in India among the Bollywood celebrities and others who said they were cancelling their planned holidays to Maldives and exhorting others to do so. Meanwhile, the new president of Maldives, Mohammed Musu, had suspended these three ministers and told them to withdraw their comments. But Musu himself, let's not forget, won the presidential elections recently, that was as recent as November 2023, on an India Out campaign and vowed to strengthen the island country's ties with China, which he did by visiting Beijing recently. Instead of normally, the tradition has been that the Maldivian president who's been elected would visit India, but this time Musu chose to visit Beijing first. Then went on to sign a comprehensive strategic agreement that would bring Maldives closer to China than ever before. And in a veiled reference to India, he said Maldives, though a small country, would not be bullied by other countries, meaning India, of course. Then he demanded that by March 15th, which is just a month and a half away, India should move out its 77 armed personnel stationed in Maldives. And these included pilots who operate two helicopters and a Dornier aircraft donated by India that was being used for both humanitarian rescue as well as surveillance, coastal surveillance. Relations between India and the Maldives seem to have reached a new nadir. So in this episode of Nothing But the Truth, we would look at how the Indian government should deal with the Maldives and answer all the big questions that this controversy raises, this outrage that has happened raises, which is, what is the importance of this tiny country that has less than 500,000 population, while Delhi city alone has a population of 35 million? Why is it so important to India? What are the options India has to deal with this deterioration in the relations between the two countries? Should India hit hard and break relations altogether with the island chain? Or among that, of course, advise tourists to stop holidaying over there, though it's of course voluntary, or should India adopt a different approach, which one could classify as a carrot and a stick approach, to bring Maldives back online again? So first, let's look at the importance of Maldives. Why is this island chain so important? Now, if you look at the map of the Indian Ocean, you'll find that the Maldives consists of 1,192 beautiful coral islands grouped in a double chain of 26 atolls in the Indian Ocean that stretch along a length of 871 kilometers north to south. Now, if you have to make an Indian comparison, that's the distance, or roughly the distance between Delhi and Bhopal. That's how long the islands are on the ocean. It is just 130 kilometers wide. And from the aircraft, if you look at the Maldives islands, it looks like a long, broken land wall in the Indian Ocean. Now, the geostrategic importance of Maldives is far more important than just its small physical size. The Indian Ocean is considered the key highway for global trade and energy supply. At the southern and northern parts of this island chain are the only two passages through which ships can pass safely. Both these sea lanes of communication are critical for maritime trade flow between the Gulf of Aden and the Gulf of Hormuz in West Asia, and of course the Straits of Malacca in Southeast Asia. So Maldives, in some senses, stands like a toll gate between this very, very important shipping lane for all countries, including India, and therefore the need for a stable, democratic, friendly dispensation, which India wants, as well as now even the US has been showing interest recently in the Maldives in the last decade or so, understanding its prime importance, and all the Quad countries that India is part of will want that to happen. But before we get into the details of what action India needs to do, let's just take a brief history of Maldives' political journey and how India's relations with it has, if you study it, been a seesaw battle in the past decade. It's been up at some time and down at other side, but more recently, with China's growing aggression in the region, faces growing competition to its relations with Maldives, and in some senses has been detrimental in the past 8 or 9 years. You know, as I said, let's go back in time a bit, and Maldives gained independence in 1965 after being a British protectorate since 1887 and was ruled by a sultanate till then. India began being its immediate large neighbor, was seen as a benevolent and benign power, and the two countries enjoyed very close relations, especially during the long reign of Mamun Abdul Gayoom from 1978 to 2008. That's 30 years. India even rescued Gayoom from a coup that was attempted against him by his rivals in 1988 in an operation called Operation Cactus. But it was Gayoom's half-brother, Abdullah Yameen, who came to power in 2013 on a total anti-India plank that pushed the nation, the island nation, towards China. And apart from that, he was a staunch Islamist that worried India, given the fact that India's major concern is Islamic terror. So during this period, Yameen's period, India's fortunes in the Maldives took a steep tumble. This was the time that China, under the expansive Xi Jinping, he had just come into power, was laying the massive groundwork for what was known as the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, apart from the maritime Silk Route, and Maldives was an important part of Beijing's plan on this. With Yameen fully backing China, Beijing established a series of new infrastructure projects in the Maldives and also pushed for a Chinese-Maldives free trade agreement. But that didn't happen because soon after that, in 2018, Yameen lost power. But before that, Malé did join the BRI as a formal member of it. Between 2013 and 2018, when Yameen was in power, Beijing had completed massive upgradation of the infrastructure in Maldives. It constructed much of the Maldives' main international airport, as well as a new bridge linking Malé to important islands called the Sinamala Bridge. And by 2018, China had loaned as much as $1.5 billion to Maldives, and that was the debt that Maldives, external debt that Maldives faced, was close to 20% of its GDP. That's how much China had invested during this period. Then, of course, the tables turned again in 2018 with the election of Mohammad Ibrahim Solih, who won with an India first policy. Now, Solih pulled out of his country's trade deal with Beijing, and then India moved into action. It authorized close to $1.4 billion to help the Maldives pay back its loans and provided additional financial support for community development projects. Now, India had currently plans to build a new cancer hospital, a cricket stadium, to develop a port, and to upgrade its airport. In fact, in 2021, the Maldivian Ministry of National Planning and Housing and Infrastructure signed a $500 million infrastructure project for a 6.7 km bridge and a causeway link that was at a very critical time. In fact, gets into the new president's islands that he won support from. So all these projects were in addition to the Coast Guard surveillance project that I had mentioned earlier that was already in place since 2009, and joint military exercises had begun between the two countries and continued to do so. But with Solih's defeat in November 2023 and the pro-China Muzu in power, the tables have again turned against India. China's main aim is to safeguard its maritime routes, which are essential for its energy supplies, and to advance its Belt and Road Initiative that I talked about earlier, while India's key aim is to maintain its preeminence in its immediate sphere of influence, its neighborhood. And so let's now go into what are India's options and how should it conduct relations with Maldives now, given the fact that you have an anti-Indian government sitting over there, and clearly Muzu has been following the China's moves in terms of strategy against India. Now, of course, it's a very curious thing that's happened is that while we think it's all black and white, if you look at the past, the leadership in Maldives knows that it cannot afford to completely alienate either India, which is its closest and largest neighbor, or China, which is the economic powerhouse of not only Asia, but now across the world as well. So if you see, successive governments since 2008 have played both the India and the China card. Yamin, who was pro-China, his administration was pro-China, between 2013 and 18 did take steps to ease tensions with New Delhi. While Soli was seen as pro-India, and his administration between 2018 and 2023 also continued to maintain strong commercial ties with Beijing. Muzu, after he came back from China and his visit over there, has also tried to allay India's fear and that of US, which, as I said earlier, also considers Maldives strategically important, by clarifying that Maldives wish to remain neutral in the various global power struggles and to maintain positive relations with all countries. Now, why is that important? Because also Muzu and his administration knows that the Maldives economy took a terrible beating during COVID, with tourism that accounts for almost 33% of its GDP declining precipitously. Earlier, visitors from China topped the list of tourists coming to the Maldives, but now the tables have turned and Indians are number one with over 250,000 to 300,000 or 3 lakh tourists visiting Maldives almost every year. That, if you look at it, totally Maldives' tourism is back to shape now and has about 1.5 million tourists visiting it. So India accounts for Indian tourists account for between 15 to 20% of the total, which is substantial. The leadership in Maldives is aware that if Indians began to pull out, it would harm them economically. And therefore, if you see, there was a lot of protest from other parties, particularly the opposition parties, to what the 3 ministers of Muzu had done by criticizing India and its prime minister. There was an immediate backlash that was there, and quickly the Maldives leadership had tried to calm those ultra wings that are there and tell them to keep quiet. But of course, we have to see whether that is just a temporary game and whether the current administration would continue to do what it set out to do, which is completely anti-India. Now, the Maldives economy, and that is another big thing that they have to worry about, has just got back on its feet, and real GDP is expected, thanks to tourism growth that has happened, real GDP is to grow by 6.5%, which is a very good recovery in 2023. But its external debt and fiscal deficit are a major cause of worry. Now, Maldives continues to borrow at a high cost especially during the global economic slowdown, and these are World Bank figures that are there. The Maldives' total debt is set to remain high at over 115% of its GDP. That's very dangerous for it. Totally, if you look at it, the total public and publicly guaranteed debt rose to $7.0 billion US at the end of 22, which is the highest ever that it has. When you compare that to $5.9 billion during 2021, and overall it used to keep it much below $1 billion before in the previous decade. So Maldives remains in trouble. It is heavily dependent on China, with loans from China making up as much as 20% of its debt burden. Overall, it is estimated, and the World Bank estimates, that the Maldives owes China $1.37 billion, or around 20% of its public debt, as I said earlier. And this makes Beijing and China its biggest bilateral creditor, ahead of Saudi Arabia and also India. And if you look at India's, what it has in terms of debt so far, the estimates are around $123 million. Of course, we're not counting the other loans that are there. But still, as you can see, China has a substantial stake, and that is one of the reasons why the Maldives government is keen to maintain relations with China, and in fact tilt towards China, because external debt in Maldives is at an all-time high of $3.5 billion, and this is in 2022, and it needs all the help it could get, and therefore Maldives and its leadership is aware of its vulnerabilities and would be wary of cutting ties completely from India altogether, trying to separate it, and they would move hopefully with greater caution for themselves. We are not sort of looking. And let's also look at Muzu. Very interesting background. He's very young, around 45 years. He won the presidency, but he still has to win. There are a lot of political battles he still has to face before he can assert his complete power over the structures, the levers of power that are there. So he has to win a majority in the Majlis or the Maldives parliament. This is due in March. And so currently it is controlled by the opposition Maldivian Democratic Party, which has a clear majority. And if he has to assert and make his presidency work, he has to win the Majlis election hands down. Otherwise, he's in trouble. In a major setback for Muzu, the Progressive Alliance coalition government, which includes the People's National Congress and the Progressive Party of Maldives, lost the recent mayoral polls for Mali. If you recall, Muzu, before he became the president, was a mayor there. And if this is a sign on the political front, then this is not going to be an easy ride for Muzu to win the parliamentary elections, or that's what political experts say. Moreover, Muzu has fallen out with his mentor Yamin, who was the great tormentor of India and who couldn't contest because he had been disqualified because of corruption charges. Muzu was the sort of compromise candidate that took charge, and therefore there is a very delicate internal political struggle going on in the Maldives as they try to find the leadership, or the leadership tries to assert itself there, particularly Muzu tries to get ahead. So India could work on this internal power struggle to its advantage. So, and apart from that, India has several other cards up its sleeves. So rather than a knee-jerk reaction, what the situation needs is a very fine balancing act for India. A carrot and stick approach that ensures that India doesn't push Muzu further into Chinese arms while ensuring that India's national interests are not seriously impacted. So apart from avoiding an anti-China rant, India doesn't want relations to deteriorate into a Hindu-Muslim fracas, which is possibly what the Islamists in Maldives are itching for. In fact, the theory is that these three ministers were trying to provoke India and therefore bring out a backlash if India took strong action against the Maldives and try and capture the Majlis. India wisely has played its cards and close to its hand. It has, the Indian government has avoided, trying to call for a ban of tourism and take other tough measures. It has kept that in reserve. It will wait and watch what needs to be done. India also has the US on its side in its endeavors. So, as I said, it must play its hand right as it has done in the past, and shun jingoistic chest thumping. Maldives is a very important chain of islands for India. It, as I mentioned earlier, it is strategically positioned. We do not want it to fall into China's hands. And the skill in India's diplomacy lies in ensuring that even as adversity strikes and there is a government that is against it, work through that to ensure that India's interests are maintained. It still has, as I said, a lot of cards. There's development expenditure that Maldives needs desperately. Maldives is in debt and India can come. There are a lot of infrastructure projects that Maldives will still want India to be doing. Let's not forget, India was a great friend of the Maldives. When there's a water shortage in 2014, India actually flew drinking water out to it. During COVID, India gave it a lot of vaccines. India has been an integral part of Maldives' development, and there is appreciation for that among the people. And as we've seen, the pendulum has swung one way or the other. India had dominated almost for 30 years. China coming in has brought a huge amount of competition to that. India should be aware, as China is doing the same thing with its neighbors, and the game it plays in the coming months will be critical for how it handles the Maldivian crisis and how it comes out the winner. So we wait and watch till then. Thank you for listening to this episode of Nothing But the Truth. I look forward to having you with me next week. Nothing but the truth.